You've spent enough time imagining the life you want. Now you begin to behave like it's already yours. Not for the world, for yourself. Because the world doesn't respond to what you wish. It responds to who you are. And who you are is not an idea. It's not a label. It's not something you find. It's something you build. Quietly. Repeatedly. Through what you do when no one is watching. You say you want peace. So you ask, do I speak like someone who already lives in peace? Do I breathe like someone who's not chasing chaos? Do I walk through a room like someone who's not afraid to be calm when everyone else is loud? You say you want discipline. So you ask, do I rise early when comfort tempts me? Do I move my body when motivation is nowhere to be found? Do I show up for the boring work as if it matters just as much as the exciting part? Because it does. It always did. You used to wait to feel ready. Now you understand. Readiness is not a feeling. It's a choice. Made again and again until your nervous system starts to believe you. Because confidence is not a precondition. It's a consequence. You don't need to fake it. You just need to act in alignment. To act as if is not to lie. It's to live the truth before the evidence appears. You don't become calm by thinking about stillness. You become calm by breathing through discomfort. You don't become wise by collecting ideas. You become wise by applying them when your emotions try to take the lead. And when you do that, even once, something shifts. Not outside, inside. Your identity begins to catch up to the standard you've quietly chosen. You've stopped asking the world to show you who you are. You've started showing the world by how you move. By how you hold your posture when everything is falling apart. By how you speak gently when your heart is racing. By how you protect your time like a man who respects himself too much to waste. You don't just want the result, you want the rhythm, you want the system. You want the structure that turns desire into direction. You've realized, and every time you say, I'll start when I'm ready, you hand your future to fear. And fear will never give it back. So you take it now. Not all at once. Not in perfection, but in presence, in motion, in daily unshakable acts that may not look impressive but which build something unbreakable. You no longer wait to be chosen. You choose the breath, the boundary, the better action when the easy one knocks. You act now not from the identity you've inherited but the one you've declared. The one that says, I move with discipline because I am a man of direction. I speak with calm because I am a man of clarity. I choose stillness because I am no longer addicted to being seen. This is no longer performance. It is not about being liked. It is about being true. And truth is not always comfortable. Sometimes it feels like walking in shoes that don't yet fit. But you walk anyway, because every step breaks them in, and soon you won't be pretending. You won't be reaching. You'll just be. Because you acted as if until it became real. That is Stoic philosophy. Not theory, embodiment. You've stopped waiting for permission to evolve. You evolve quietly now through action, through alignment, through the small choices that no one else notices, but that rewrite your future in silence. You no longer seek to be motivated. You seek to be consistent. Because you've learned that consistency shapes character, and character shapes destiny. You've stopped saying, I want to be that man, and you've started asking, what would that man do right now? Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Would he scroll endlessly to avoid discomfort? Would he delay what matters just to feel safe? Would he wait until the fear went away before he moved? No, he would move. With fear, with doubt, with uncertainty. Because he knows that clarity is built on the other side of action. So now you move, as if you are already him. Not to pretend, to practice. To begin where you are with what you have before the world gives you permission. You don't seek applause anymore. You seek alignment. Because applause fades, but alignment holds. It holds when people doubt you. It holds when the results take time. It holds when everything external says, why are you still trying? And you answer, I'm not trying, I'm becoming. You've let go of the idea that your current reality defines your potential. Now you act like someone who knows he can build anything, yes, as long as he stays in motion. And motion doesn't mean running. Sometimes it's a breath. Sometimes it's writing one line. Sometimes it's choosing the harder path when no one will notice but you. You've made peace with discomfort because you've realized discomfort isn't punishment. It's the forge, and every time you sit with it instead of avoiding it, you strengthen. You no longer fantasize about progress. You build it, brick by invisible brick, action by repeated action, not once, but daily. You wake up early not because it's easy, but because the man you aim to be doesn't waste time. You train not because it's convenient, but because you know. Longer make decisions based on comfort. You speak less, you listen more, you breathe deeper. You hold your posture even when your emotions try to fold you. You used to fall apart when things didn't go your way. Now you remain. Because you've trained yourself to act from principle, not from mood. You've stopped waiting to be fixed. You've stopped searching for the shortcut. You're not hacking your life. You're mastering it. One act of alignment at a time. And when the old self calls, the one who quit early, the one who talked more than he acted, the one who needed to feel good to do the right thing, you let him fade. Not with force, with repetition. Because the more you act like the man you respect, the more you become him. You don't need evidence to begin. You need effort. You need rhythm. You need silence and the willingness to keep showing up before anyone sees results, and now you do. You show up like the outcome is already yours. Because deep down you know it is. If you refuse to stop acting like it, that is Stoic philosophy, not hope, habituation. You don't wait for things to look different, you act different. Because now you understand you are not what you dream, you are what you do. And the man who acts in alignment with the life he wants is already walking in that direction, whether the world sees it or not. You've stopped needing proof before you move. You've stopped needing validation before you commit. Now, your actions are your vote. Your routine is your signature. Your breath, your boundary. You no longer demand the future to appear fully formed. You shape it one step at a time. Not with certainty, with clarity. The clarity that says, I know what I value, and I will behave like I value it whether or not. It's easy whether or not it's fast. You've learned that the gap between who you are and who you want to be is built with ordinary days. And you don't waste those days anymore. You wake with intention. You train your body not for looks, but for strength, for discipline, for the practice of keeping a promise to yourself every day. You don't wait for approval to eat with awareness, to walk with presence, to move with a schedule that reflects your values instead of your emotions. You no longer say, I want to feel calm. You practice calm in the middle of discomfort. You breathe slower when everything speeds up. You speak softer when chaos tempts you to react. You pause before letting emotion take the wheel. Because you know, if you can hold stillness, in the small moments you'll carry strength into the big ones. And that strength isn't loud, it's built. Slowly, in solitude, through repetition. You don't call it pretending anymore. You call it preparation. Because the man who acts as if he already holds clarity creates it. The man who behaves as if he already respects himself earns that respect, not from others, from within. You don't chase that feeling anymore. You embody it. You walk like someone who's no longer apologizing for becoming. You protect your space not with defensiveness, but with devotion to what matters. You no longer let old patterns drive. You observe them. You breathe through them. You respond from presence, not programming. You've become the kind of man who acts in alignment not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Because that's when it counts. When your feelings say rest, but your principles say rise. When distraction knocks and you say no with action, not excuse. You're no longer addicted to reacting. Now you act with calm, with purpose, with rhythm. And when the results take time, you don't panic. You've already become the kind of man who can handle waiting. Because you're not waiting from lack, you're waiting with direction. You act now not to force the outcome, but to align with it. And alignment is the real win. Because the more You act like it's already yours the more you realize you've already changed. That is Stoic philosophy, not imagined, lived. You've stopped needing to feel different before you act different. You act and let the feeling follow. Because you've realized your emotions aren't always the compass. Your values are. And values don't shout. They whisper. They wait. And when you honor them through action, they build identity. You no longer drift through your day. You begin it with presence, with posture, with the quiet discipline of a man who doesn't perform improvement. He lives it. You speak less now. Because you've learned that change doesn't need to be announced. It just needs to be repeated. Consistently, calmly, deliberately. You move like someone who's already chosen, not someone trying to convince others or prove himself. You've made the decision, and your daily actions prove that decision over and over until it no longer feels like effort. It feels like you. That version of you used to chase is now walking with you. Not because anything magical happened, but because you stopped waiting for life to change and started behaving like the man who already holds what he wants. You stopped asking, "Do I deserve this?" and started asking, "Will I show up like someone who does?" And the answer is yes, every time you rise on time, every time you keep the small promise, every time you choose presence over reaction, effort over excuse, patience over panic, you become him. Not someday. Today, you've shifted your identity from outcome-based to action-based, from fantasy to embodiment. You used to visualize. Now you actualize. You sit in silence not to escape but to enter. Into yourself, into clarity, into the awareness that who you are when no one's watching is who you really are, and that man no longer needs to be convinced. He simply does. What is right, what is aligned, what is hard without drama. You don't beg your future to arrive. You act like it's already here. Because the man who shows up now for what he says he wants will one day look around and realize he's been living it for a long time. You no longer try to become, you live. With focus, with restraint, with consistency. You no longer collapse when it gets hard, because you've trained in the dark. You've trained without applause. You've trained without needing recognition. You've become resilient, not by doing something big once, but by doing something small every day without fail. You don't compromise your standard anymore. Not for convenience, not for approval, not for old habits dressed as comfort. You live aligned now. And alignment doesn't feel flashy. It feels steady. You carry your calm into rooms full of noise. You bring your clarity into places where confusion dominates. And you no longer need to explain your difference, you simply embody it. That is Stoic philosophy, not theory, practice. You've stopped needing a perfect moment to show discipline. You create the moment by showing up anyway. Because you've realized, discipline is not something you fall into. It's something you walk into over and over until your feet stop hesitating. You don't negotiate with your standards anymore. You enforce them by living them. No threats, no reminders, just consistent proof that the old version of you no longer leads. You used to collapse when life didn't go your way. Now you stand straighter, because difficulty doesn't interrupt your direction. It reveals your depth. You carry yourself differently now. You don't walk like someone who's waiting to arrive. You walk like someone who's already chosen his destination. And each step is an echo of that decision. Not rushed, not loud, just aligned. You don't act like the man you hope to be because you're pretending. You act like him because you're practicing, and that practice has changed your energy. You sit in discomfort now without trying to fix it. You hold your center without trying to justify it. You stay composed not because nothing affects you, but because nothing owns you. You've taken back that ownership through boundaries, through breath, through the decision to no longer be dragged by every impulse, every urge, every old script that says, this is who you've always been. You answer it with action, not debate, not explanation, just action. You show up for the hard conversation not because you feel ready, but because the man you are now doesn't avoid what's real. You say no without guilt. You say yes without overthinking. Because your decisions now are based on values, not validation. You are not chasing peace, you are maintaining it. By protecting your mornings, by refining your environment, by letting go of anything that clouds your clarity. You don't dress like you're trying to impress. You dress like someone who respects himself. You don't speak to be heard. You speak when it matters. And your silence now has more weight than your words ever did. Because people feel what you've built, even if they don't understand it. You've stopped trying to convert everyone to your mindset. You just live it. And in living it, you attract those on the same path. Not through persuasion, through presence. You don't prove anything now. You live proof. Through your attention, through your rhythm, through your refusal to compromise your calm for temporary approval. You are not who you used to be. Not because you said so. Because you act differently when no one is watching. And that difference is irreversible. Because it's no longer behavior. It's identity. That is Stoic philosophy. Not told, transmitted. You no longer react like the man you once were. Because you've lived too many mornings in silence to be pulled back by noise. You've said no too many times to let one weak moment reset your standard. You've shown up in discomfort enough to know you can handle far more than your feelings suggest. You move now with a different rhythm. You're not faster, you're firmer, you're not louder, you're sharper. You've traded friction for flow not because the world softened, but because you stopped resisting the path. You've stopped asking if you're capable. You act. Because the man who doubts himself delays. But you've run out of time for delay. You've trained your breath to meet pressure. You've trained your tongue to meet conflict with clarity. You've trained your eyes to stay on the mission when distractions disguise themselves as progress. And now, you no longer fear the plateau. You understand. The repetition is where the real self is sculpted. It's not the high moments. It's not the breakthroughs. It's the practice of walking past temptation to return to what matters again and again and again. You don't crave transformation anymore. You live inside it. You don't chase results. You become someone who can carry them when they arrive. Because the man who gets what he wants without becoming who it requires loses it. But you're not here to lose. You're here to lead. Yourself first. And then whoever has the eyes to follow. You no longer repeat the story of your past limits. You speak only through your presence, through the habits that hold under pressure, through the structure that doesn't collapse just because your mood does. You're not perfect. You're precise. And that precision was earned in early mornings, in repeated refusals to quit, in choosing to move when doubt told you to wait. You no longer celebrate intentions, you celebrate integrity. Did I show up when it was hard? Did I hold the standard when no one was looking? Did I act in alignment with the life I say I want? That's your scoreboard now. Not likes, not attention, not approval. Because you've seen what approval costs when it's purchased through self-betrayal, and you no longer pay that price. You've outgrown the version of you that needed to be seen. Now you're focused on being strong enough to hold what you've prayed for. You walk into rooms not hoping for respect, but carrying it. And when someone disrespects you, you don't match it. You remain. Because composure is your strength now. You carry peace like a man carries fire. With care, with reverence, with a promise to never drop it just because someone else is careless. That is Stoic philosophy. Not concept. Code. You've stopped needing the world to change before you do. You change first. Because that's where your power lives. Not in reaction, but in direction. You move through discomfort like a man who's practiced pain and made peace with it. Not because you enjoy it, but because you've learned pain is just another form of pressure meant to reveal what's solid and what's still soft. You used to flinch. Now you breathe. You used to fight back with fire. Now you fight nothing at all. Because you've come to understand. Not every challenge is an enemy. Some are training. Some are mirrors. Some are gates guarding the next level of you. You've stopped looking for shortcuts because you know the long way is the way. It's the road where character is built, where habits are sharpened, where your voice no longer trembles when you speak the truth. And that truth doesn't need to be shouted. It lives in your posture, in your gaze, in the way you stay silent when others would scramble to defend. Because the man you are now doesn't need defense. He needs consistency. And you've chosen that. Not for a week, Not for a month, but for life. This life you're building is no longer about what you earn. It's about what you embody. You rise not for rewards, but for rhythm. You show up not for applause, but for alignment. Your discipline isn't motivated by fear of failure. It's fueled by respect for the future you've already decided to meet. And that future isn't waiting to arrive. It's being built right now with each breath, each rep, each decision to act as if the man you admire is already inside you, waking up, growing stronger through every hard thing you don't avoid. You no longer abandon yourself just to feel better in the moment. You sit through the craving. You breathe through the confusion. You listen to the silence until clarity speaks. And when it does, you follow it. Not with drama, but with devotion. Because devotion is how you act when no one is watching. It's how you move when the results are invisible. It's how you carry your life like it matters, and because it does. You don't fold under pressure now. You respond. You don't collapse under judgment. You refine. You don't lower your standard just because someone else feels uncomfortable. You hold it steady, without force, without apology. Because the man who holds his standard becomes his standard. And that man is no longer a version you reach for. He's the version you return to, every morning, every choice, every breath. That is Stoic philosophy, not learned, lived. You've stopped hoping to be the kind of man who is unshakable. You've started behaving like him. Not when it's easy, when it's inconvenient, when your emotions flare, when your doubts get loud. That's when the real work begins. And now you show up for it. Because the man who acts in alignment doesn't need constant confidence, he just needs the next step, and the courage to take it even when he's uncertain. You've stopped identifying with the noise in your head. You've stopped letting old patterns decide what you do next. Now, you observe. You breathe. You move with intention, even when your mind offers excuses. You act like someone who's already free because you've realized freedom doesn't begin when circumstances change. It begins when you stop being enslaved to the version of you that never learned to pause. And now, you pause. You don't lash out. You lean in, to silence, to control, to the deeper truth behind the tension. You don't push for peace anymore. You bring it, through your discipline, through your presence, through your refusal to let the outside world dictate your internal state. You've become the man who doesn't chase impact but creates it through how he moves. How he walks into a room without needing to own it. How he handles disagreement without needing to dominate it. How he shows up not for attention but for alignment. You used to think strength meant being invincible. Now you know it means being fully human but no longer ruled by impulse. You've mastered the art of sitting with emotion without becoming it. Of witnessing your pain without lashing out. Of holding your power without needing to prove it. This is not because you are detached, it's because you are anchored. And when you are anchored, you don't fear the wind. You don't overreact to waves. You stay. You move forward. You remain whole. You've stopped measuring progress by how much you've achieved. Now you measure it by how often you return to the path when life tries to knock you off course. And you return every time. With less noise. With more grace. With a steady rhythm that says, I know who I am, I know what I value, and I won't betray it just because this moment feels heavy. You've stopped trying to convince yourself you're strong. You act strong. Through structure, through solitude, through small decisions that keep your integrity intact, even when no one's looking. You don't try to control others. You control your attention. You don't try to change the world. You show up so completely that the world responds differently to you without you saying a word. And that kind of shift only comes from practice, from the decision to behave like the man you say you are before it's comfortable, before it's recognized, before it's easy. That is Stoic philosophy. Not delayed, delivered. You've stopped needing the outside world to reflect your growth. Now you move as if the growth already happened. Because you've learned, when you act from the identity you're building, you begin to believe in it. And when you believe in it, you behave like it. And when you behave like it, it becomes real. You walk into the day not as someone searching for direction, but as someone carrying it. You don't chase clarity, you become clear. Through routine, through rhythm, through refusing to start your morning with someone else's priorities. You don't check your phone first. You check your breath. You check your posture. You check your intention. Because intention, when reinforced by behavior, becomes identity. And now your behavior speaks long before your words do. You speak slowly. You move precisely. You respond rather than react. And every time you do, you reinforce the man you've already decided to be. There is no more pretending. You are no longer trying to fool anyone. You are done performing. Now you are practicing, quietly, repetitively, until your baseline has shifted. You've stopped romanticizing self-control. Now you practice it in ordinary moments, by waking when you said you would, by saying no when it's easier to say yes, by choosing structure when your body begs for comfort. You've stopped needing perfect plans. You move with imperfect action. Because the man who waits is the man who never begins. And you've seen what waiting costs. It costs momentum. It costs belief. It costs identity. You don't wait anymore. You take the first step as if the rest will follow. And it does. Because motion creates confidence, not the other way around. You've stopped consuming content that tells you who you could be. You act now as if you already are. You don't need 100 tips. You need one principle, followed with integrity every single day. You've stopped seeking permission to think big. Now you live small moments with full presence. Because presence is where your future begins, not in fantasy, in repetition. You've stopped escaping into vision. You've come back to discipline, to reality, to the structure that holds when your emotions don't. You trust structure now, more than mood, more than approval, more than the temporary satisfaction of doing what feels good. You've stopped trying to be impressive. You've become consistent, and consistency is the quietest kind of strength. But it changes everything because now you don't need the world to believe in you. You've seen what happens when you believe in yourself through your actions. You carry yourself differently, not with arrogance but with calm, not with noise but with depth. That depth is the result of the man who no longer waits for the future. He lives like it's already here. That is Stoic philosophy. Not passive, powerful. You no longer ask for the world's permission to rise. You rise because you've already chosen. Chosen to act with clarity before confusion arrives. Chosen to build momentum before doubt has a chance to speak. Chosen to behave like the man who doesn't ask, "What should I do?" but instead affirms, "This is who I am." You've stopped trying to become. You've started behaving, and behavior, repeated, refined, reinforced, is what transforms you. You don't need to convince yourself anymore. You show yourself. With how you sit in discomfort without negotiating. With how you hold your posture when your old self wants to collapse. With how you walk away from distraction, not because you're bored, but because you're focused. You've stopped being surprised by resistance. You welcome it now, not as a friend but as a test, one you're prepared for, because you've built the habit of returning to your standard no matter how far you drift. You no longer fear the drift. You just don't let it decide who you are. You correct gently. You realign quickly. You reset daily. You wake up early not to prove anything, but to be with yourself before the world interferes. And in that time, you remind yourself that peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you generate through presence. You write. You reflect. Not because you're lost, but because clarity deepens when it's repeated. You review your day before it begins. Not because you control outcomes, but because the man who prepares doesn't panic. You eat deliberately. You train intentionally. You move without distraction. Because movement, for you, is not about burning energy. It's about building identity. You don't perform habits anymore. You carry them as part of who you are, not who you're trying to be. You speak less about what you're becoming. You behave like you're already there. And when others ask how you've changed, you don't answer. You show. In how you walk through chaos, in how you decline what isn't aligned, in how you say yes to what once scared you. You've made peace with fear. Not by ignoring it, but by acting through it. Because courage, as you've learned, isn't the absence of fear. It's the repetition of right action despite fear. You've become dangerous in the best way. Not because you dominate, because you can't be moved. Your presence now is not the result of pretending. It's the result of practiced discipline, quiet repetition, unseen effort. And the deeper you go, the less you need to be recognized. Because you recognize yourself in your actions, and that is enough. You've chosen to live like the outcome is already yours. And by doing so, you've become the kind of man who will carry that outcome when it finally arrives. That is Stoic philosophy. Not claimed, proven. You've stopped waiting for consistency to feel natural. Now you act with consistency until it becomes your nature. Because you understand, there is no perfect mindset. Only repeated moments of alignment stacked daily until even your worst days still move in the right direction. You no longer aim to feel like the man you respect. You act like him. Especially when it's hard. Especially when no one's looking. Especially when the old version of you tries to whisper, "Take it easy." Just once. But you don't. Not because you're rigid. Because you've outgrown the cost of compromise. You've stopped dipping in and out of discipline. Now it's not something you do, it's someone you are. And that identity wasn't granted, it was built. With silence, with sweat, with the quiet refusal to break your word even when it would have been easier. You're not chasing extremes anymore. You've chosen the steady. You've chosen the rhythm that doesn't rely on motivation, but relies on one truth. I do this because it's who I am. And when that rhythm is interrupted, you don't fall apart. You reset. You don't make it personal. You make it precise. You don't spiral. You simplify. Because you've learned, you don't need to do everything right. You just need to do the right things repeatedly. You've stopped romanticizing. Next level. You've learned that mastery lives in the current level done with excellence. And excellence is not about perfection. It's about presence. You've stopped wishing for control. Now, you move with calm inside the uncontrollable. You don't flinch at uncertainty. You've trained for it. You've trained your breath. You've trained your mind. You've trained your response. So now when life pushes, you don't push back. You hold. And that stillness is stronger than any reaction you could have offered. You no longer give away your focus for free. You guard it. Because you've tasted the power of sustained attention, of working with full presence, of removing noise so that what remains is potent. You've stopped trying to impress. Now you move from integrity. And integrity is not performance. It's being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I showed up when I didn't feel like it. You've stopped calling discipline a grind. You call it grace. Because every time you choose it, you feel lighter, not heavier, lighter. Because alignment always weighs less than avoidance. You wake with order. You move with purpose. You reflect with honesty. And when you fall short, you don't hide. You correct. That correction isn't shame, it's strength. You don't need to be perfect to be proud. You just need to stay close to the standard, and now you do. That is Stoic philosophy. Not effort for applause, effort for honor. You no longer see self-mastery as an end goal. You live it as a practice, a returning, a remembering. Not once, but every day. You don't wait to feel aligned. You act in alignment until it becomes your default. And even when it doesn't feel natural, you still choose it. Because you know, temporary emotion is no match for eternal principle. You've stopped running from your lower self. You've learned to face it, not to indulge it, to discipline it. And in doing so, you've quieted the voice that once ran your life. You don't reach for old coping mechanisms anymore. You reach for structure. You reach for breath. You reach for the habits you spent months building while no one else noticed. You've made peace with being misunderstood. You've made peace with being underestimated. Because you don't act to be seen, you act to stay aligned. And that kind of acting is not performance, it's power. You walk into the world each day like a man who's not hoping for momentum. You've already created it. In the morning, in the stillness, in the repetition of the exact routines that most people call boring but which you now call sacred. You don't chase intensity anymore. You honor rhythm, because you know, true growth doesn't happen in the extreme. It happens in the ordinary, done extraordinarily well. You keep your space clean, you keep your calendar honest, you keep your word even when no one's watching. Especially then, you no longer mistake chaos for opportunity. You pause. You ask, does this serve my path? And if it doesn't, you let it go. No drama, no justification, just clarity. You don't fear discomfort. You know it's part of the price for peace, for clarity, for real freedom, and you're willing to pay. Every day, because you've learned, when you stop paying for it in advance, you always pay for it later. You lead yourself now. Not with force, but with focus. Not with pressure, but with presence. You've become the man who others notice, not because he's trying to be noticed, but because his energy is different. It's calm. It's grounded. It's disciplined. And discipline, when carried with grace, is undeniable. You no longer chase results. You embody the process. And the process has made you better. Not just stronger, wiser, more patient, less reactive, more whole. You've stopped becoming. You've started being. And the being is built on action. Not what you say, but what you do when the moment calls. And when the moment calls now, you don't hesitate. You answer. With presence, with clarity, with action that reflects identity. This is who you are now. Not because the world crowned you, but because you crowned yourself. Through repetition, through return, through unshakable practice. That is Stoic philosophy. Not a lesson, a way of life.